Good evening, everyone, and very welcome to our website and to the site Soul to Soul. This evening, I have Brian Robertson with me from Vancouver Island, Victoria in Canada. Very, very warmly welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. And I would like you to just do a presentation of yourself, who you are and what you are doing there in Victoria.
Well, I oversee the Inner Quest Foundation, and the Inner Quest Foundation is a long-standing organization. It's actually, its roots back to 170 years ago. It's had a few name changes and a few amalgamations with different esoteric and spiritualist and theosophical groups over that 170 years. And the tradition really is not only about living a full and complete life, but also understanding consciousness beyond who we are and those worlds upon worlds that are present, whether we realize it or not. And discovering that spirit within and that ability and that magic that is that spirit that allows society to move forward collectively as a whole. And so I am always honored to serve. I've been there for many decades, and I come from a past that is interwoven with psychologists and innovators and those who were at the fore of the psychedelic experimental group through governments to one of my teachers literally sitting at the table and organizing Greenpeace as well as integrating interracial interaction in the United States, because the movement of the spirit is the movement of society forward. And so I seek to fulfill that which I've been encouraged to do, and that is to move society forward in the way I understand it within the spirit. So
I know that you have a community there in Victoria, the Open Door Sanctuary as well. And do you feel that people really like to come together in that way, that you feel a longing for gathering among people?
Yes, absolutely. We have a very strong community at this point in time, a little bit challenged, like everyone else within communities. Communities, as you know, small groups or big groups, have slowly disintegrated and showing the disintegration over a number of years now, due to sort of that seeking of self without realizing that we need others to discover ourselves. And so community to me is very, very important. I was brought up with a very strong encouragement of community in so many ways. And it is the community that aids us to confront our own healing, to confront our own being, and to seek that beauty within. So it's one of my passions, and our community is a going concern. Our community is one that is I find very welcoming. They have now connections around the world, and encourage that we come together within like-mindedness to move not only ourselves forward to heal ourselves, but also to celebrate life, living and loving. And in a time where studies have shown where communities actually is on the decline, we also see mental health challenges from anxiety to depression and the like, that the dispersal of the tribal consciousness, even in its modern form, is actually creating very much mental health challenges today. And so one of our mandates is to keep a very strong local community, but also a community of the heart wherever we are in the world, and who we can touch that way. And we have opportunities for that.
I'm fortunate to have had the opportunity to be in your center many times, Brian, and the things that really struck me is that to be together in a community and do things together, serve others and each others and do things. It's really fulfilling in so many ways that I wasn't aware of the power and the strength of that we create together as a community when you do things together. It can be the simplest things, but to do it together and to have a common intention and purpose with it, how powerful that is to be a part of.
Yeah, it is very, very powerful. And when we're rushing around trying to be something and create a sense of value in our doing versus just being together, we don't recognize that it's others that ignite the power and ignite our own healing and awaken us to aspects of creativity and wonderment once again. When a community seeks to be healthy and whole, and when I say that, many people think it's all love and light, and it isn't. There's always challenges within community, but that power to offer a movement within the soul consciousness of the individual and reawaken the soul imagination of the individual, and then them to serve within the community to inspire others. It's a wonderful thing to observe, to be a part of, and to share. Mm-hmm. And I'm comforted in just that acknowledgement that you just shared, because it is very powerful and oftentimes overlooked. And it's overlooked because it takes time, it takes effort, it takes dedication, it takes patience. It takes joys and it takes tears, all those things. And mostly it takes our loving. So it's great. And it's always wonderful when you have been here and others who come, or the community itself gets excited when we have what we consider an extended family around the world coming just for a stopgap within the community. Mm.
Yeah, it's great to hear you talk about it, and I sense your passion there, Brian. But I also would like to ask again about what's your passion in life at the moment. I know you're a passionate person, but where goes your heart and your passion at the moment?
Well, I've got a few of them. I mean, my passion, of course, is community, but my passion is also consciousness. It always has been. And one of the things that, again, I was brought up with, is a consciousness movement, and what that understanding is and was and still is today, and what the power of the spirit and what people coin as mediumship, although we're not really seeing much of it today, is. And that may be a step back for some people who are hungry to understand that. But our job, I believe, within the curiosity, the wonderment of the passion of those aspects of consciousness that are unseen, those talents that we coin in different ways, has traditionally always been there to move the world forward. And I very much have still a passion for that, no matter how we see mediumship today, how we see consciousness, how we see healing today. And right at the moment, I would love those who are interested in this type of work to be able to bring that enthusiasm and that passion and that understanding of energy and spirit, and however you want to coin it, into an awareness that brings it to the table of consciousness, because we're not at the table at the moment. We are not at the table with neuroscience. We're not at the table in the consciousness movement. We're not at the table really to do with spirituality, although many people come to recognize a faculty called mediumship or intuition and the like, and believe that it's spiritual or a gift by nature, not realizing that it's a faculty of mind. It is a function of the brain that science has already shown. And the sad thing is we have not been at the table of consciousness, the movement of understanding consciousness of mind in the full ability of who we are for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And I know people will argue that, and yet if we are looking at the people who are at the table and those who are really researching it, not just research groups, we find that we are relying on information that is outdated and outmoded. We are not in the 21st century in our belief systems. We're often in the 14th century and I have a passion of moving that forward, of challenging myself as much as others. We have individuals who created whole psychological movements in the last 100+ years that are powerful tools, all rooted in what we do. And yet there are those who are being taught their talent and are not taught those tools, from the personifications of self to the understanding of mind and consciousness, the hard question. And the hard question is consciousness in the brain, or is it outside of the brain? Quantum physics, which I encourage every medium or anyone who is on a spiritual path, do not voice it unless you have studied it, because there are many times that it has been rather embarrassing. And so my passion is education. My passion is freedom. My passion is to allow people the space to shine, to challenge, to get annoyed, to learn, to heal, to live, and to breathe. So that's sort of the whole bucket, if you like.
That's great to hear. And what do you feel, Brian, how do you feel that we can intervolve and to cross over the knowledge, the esoteric knowledge, and get it into the table, as you said, with the psychological faculties and the quantum physics? And because I feel so strongly that all this knowledge is so needed today.
Absolutely.
For me, from my point of view, it's a personal right to know about them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm on page with what you just shared, and what it is it takes our willingness to surrender that which no longer seeks to present itself as a understanding of the talent of the esoteric system. You know, one of the wonderful things about the esoteric movement is that it held sort of the mysteries of the unseen and the spirituality, if you like, of that. And what a lot of people don't understand within its history, it was also had the willingness to move its understanding. What they believed in generations of the past, they no longer believed in. And from my teachers that I had privilege of, they always said, you must bring that understanding forward. You must bring it into the generation you are in with all the tools that are afforded by life, research, the world. And I held that, and I still hold that to be true. And I also realized that I stood on, as I have been educating for a long time, as you know, for a number of decades now, is that I've stood on the platform and said, you know, we used to teach this, and I used to teach this, but now we know this not to be true, and these are the reasons why. I think the willingness to be able to let go of what we understood to be a reality and to explain it out to those who are up and coming in the discovery of the beauty of any talent is important, because that's how we move it forward. That's how we move it forward. And so that movement of it forward is something that I believe we are responsible for as well. And it doesn't always go over very well, because as one of my teachers said, Ray Willem, you can have as many fairies in the backyard as you want, as long as you know that you put them there. And when you're willing to let those go, you might actually find a real one. And so it's that natural unfoldment of letting go of the illusion of what that esoteric system is to find the deeper roots and to bring it to the table. Because one of the things is there are branches of those within the world of science and research and consciousness that are looking at that. And they're looking at it, and they're going into different places around the world to witness platform mediumship and to witness different aspects of ritual and tribal ritual. And one of the things that was presented to me a few years ago was that they've gone into different mediumistic demonstrations only to see psychism presented rather than mediumship. And the firm belief that those mediums themselves believed that they were in contact with the spirit. And that is from a observational and an understanding of the mind and how brain patterns work and the like. And the big challenge within those in the consciousness movement is, how do they address that when they recognize, for instance, that the Rhine Institute still has not come up with what his intention was, to say that consciousness is outside of the body. And so when that was presented to myself and Simon James, it was, okay, the mechanics that we're doing to create get the engine going of the talent, of the sensate and the mysteries and the understanding, because most people will stay with the ability versus the esoteric aspects, because mediumship in the esoteric world is much bigger than a platform, than a healing, and the like. We realize that most people, and we've realized for some time, and we're not the only ones, there are other colleagues who definitely feel the same way, where people are so eager and they hang on to the mind mechanics of an ability and not actually allowing the natural ability to shine. So the researchers are seeing that. They see the patterns. They know how that function works. And so they've gone different parts of the world, and this is what they're witnessing. And again, sadly, and I say sadly, because of course those who are demonstrating truly believe that they're with the spirit world, without realizing that they're actually just with a dense energy system. Right? So science needs those to have the courage to surrender their fairies.
Yeah.
To bring in what's the magic, because we have the right. We have the right, and I will use that word as well, to discover the never-ending story of the mysteries of life. And anyone who has a talent, a creativity, has that energetic mystery to offer. And it is never quantified by a big thing or a small thing. It just is, if I can say that to you. So
it just occurred to me now, the question come up about the ability to be mediumistic is something that is in every part of the world, in every cultures, in every part of the world, isn't it? It's not just we in the Western world that has that ability, or have that as a part of our what do you say, our culture? Isn't it so that other folks and other people are more integrated with it and have it more in a more natural way? Here it's more like a show or something that a few people can entertain with, but it's integrated from a holistic point of view better in other cultures. It was a long question.
No, I do agree with what you're saying, and why I agree with what you're saying is because not only myself but Simon James have had the good fortune of working with other cultures and other cultures that are not necessarily fully westernized, and we have not only bore witness to that talent, that esoteric world of certain individuals, but also certain cultures that believe strongly in it. And it's very simple in many ways and yet very complex in others. And we have actually created a huge box that has actually limited our talent in the West, not expanded it, where the cultures that we have worked with, we have found that they touch all things and they know how to touch all things. And they touch all things not by just believing, but actually knowing. And so they are willing within themselves to transform and change. Mm-hmm. And they are willing to also, in some areas of their cultural belief, to do with their own natural mysteries or esoteric traditions, to move it forward. And I mean, the first time I experienced that was when I was hired back in the mid-90s to go to Nepal and work and serve. And I was serving those who we would call in the world that most people know me as in mediumship, although they don't, of course, use that word. And why I was serving in that capacity is because they realized that the children, and that's why I was there, besides a number of other things that they asked me to do, was that I worked with children, because in their tradition, they took those with that particular talent early, let them be children, did not force their minds, because they also knew that, and I will use our term, they knew if they forced that talent too early, especially around puberty, that there was risk of dissociative behaviors to the point of mental health. Mm-hmm. So they were very, very careful with their children. But at the same time, what they needed myself is for them to understand the change of mindset, because they were totally starting to be taken out of their culture because of the West. And so I was a bridge. I was just a bridge of to aid in those who were the facilitators of these children and these young adults, to make sure that the talent that they believed was important for their culture and that mystery was still intact, but approached in a different way. And so I did my best to provide that. What I need to say with that, they did some very amazing things. Some I've shared within groups, others I have not, for a reason out of honor and respect. When I approached them to ask how they did that, they wouldn't tell me. Okay. Because it was sacred to their tradition, and I was still an outsider. And I respected that. And I respect that because I come from, on my mother's side, my mother comes from a certain tribe down the line, a few generations up, of the tradition of the talent. And most of it was always a talent that they often grabbed the women to do with the esoteric mysteries, right, and their talents. So, and it was much broader then. So, and so she now takes great pride that her son, he gets it from me, as she always says. So, and she even said to a family member, my sister, I wish I didn't hold him back when he was younger. But anyways, that's another story. So again, but even within that tradition of my family on that side, there are certain aspects to it that I know, just understanding the culture of that ancestral root would never be discussed. So.
How do you see the opportunities in the future, Brian, when it comes to an opportunity for the esoteric knowledge to be a part of something that can be useful, vulnerable? It can be, what's the word I want to say in English here? Useful looks so simple, or sounds so simple, but how can it be serving people in the future in a good way, to be a part of that? How can you see that it will be a part of society more easily?
It already has historically. I mean, historically, even the very screen that we're speaking on, it has threads into the esoteric system, into mediumship, into all those things. A lot of people don't realize in sort of the big picture of the West, the integration of inspiration, of mediumship, of the esoteric knowledge, and how it infiltrated and created a consciousness, but also things like the television, things like the telephone, things like the computer, all have threads due to that. And I believe we still, there will always be a place at the table. We just got to get back to the table. And that is going to be a huge challenge, because it's not just reading a book on consciousness. It's not just sort of going, oh, yes, it's this. It's really stripping down and seeking how we integrate understanding of the 21st century into the talent that we have. So it's got a big role. And they're looking for it within consciousness studies. They're looking for it. But they're also very aware that there is this whole huge wave that they're trying to hold back in this spirituality movement. And it's not just what we do. There is, in the consciousness movement, there's more and more psychedelic research again. And as I said, one of my teachers was actually one of the first, along with a number of more famous people, because they wrote books in the study, government studies of LSD and mescaline and all those type of things to do with consciousness. And the forefront of the research of those individuals, the perennial philosophy, etc., of Huxley's. He was there with Huxley. So again, but it is now also something that we've done again in the West, and we've marketed it. We've made it a commodity. So, I have spoken to a number of people. I've spoken to one person who is actually interested in spirituality versus religion movement, who is actually very active in the United States, and she has actually done controlled psychedelics 19 times, and I've spent, without exaggeration, thousands of dollars to go down to each time, like thousands of dollars each time, down into South America to sort of shortcut, as she called it, shortcut my spirituality. And there's a whole market. There's a whole that has been created. And again, what happens is it becomes a commodity, and spirituality isn't a commodity. It's always been a business, and I'm very aware of that. I mean, we can look at any religion. We can look at the Buddhist religion, we can look at the Catholic religion, the Hindu religion, and so on and so on and so on. So there's always been a building of business around spirituality in some form or another. But now we're in the commodity business, and so mediumship is a commodity business, and psychedelics is a commodity business, and the shortcut hopes. And so how do we get back to that traditional ritual of in areas of psychedelics and what they were used for, and do they have a purpose for everyone, and all those things? So again, there's a challenge within the consciousness movement to hold that back and yet want to research it, to see the value of it. And so, and it's the same with mediumship and the esoteric mysteries and energy systems and all those type of things that kind of go with the esoteric movement. They're constantly having to hold certain things back because they're a commodity. They're on the market on every street corner. And so again, that's a challenge. And so really, it's beholden to all of us who have a passion to ask ourselves, what is this to me? And why am I truly doing it? Am I doing it to make me feel important, feel good, feel valued? Or am I doing because my spirit moves it? And I recognize that maybe spirituality isn't all love and light, that it's a journey with also hate and darkness, because it's a contrast. And that's what spirituality is, that discovery through sometimes our pain to get to our wisdom, you know. And so we now even banter the word wisdom a lot. What's your wisdom? And I really have always believed in that word, because everybody has wisdom, but now we use it so lightly, you know. It's sometimes just a regurgitation of a quote of somebody else's versus a heartfelt act of our own. Right. So,
in Sweden, Brian, we talk a lot about mental health, and that more and more people are getting more and more anxious and unhealthy when it comes to the psychic. And it goes very, very young, and it goes very, very, a lot of young people also feel depressed and stressed and so on. And I think it's not just Sweden. I think it's a very Western thing.
Yes.
So what do you believe is our opportunity to change that, to come to a point, tipping point, where we feel like now it's the time to do something else and to be aware of the wholeness of what we are, so we can live other lives and value things and live more peaceful?
You know, basically what you just said is it in a nutshell. And I believe the movement itself has a place at that table because it's part of it. In so many ways. And we've been taught, especially in the West, in the last few generations, to everything comes quick and everything comes easy and it's all about me. And when it comes to aspects of sort of this, what we're talking about, there are very high risks to open the door to psychism, to mediumship, to the like. If there's a dark side, the dark side has to do with our own self, our own brain. Studies have already shown, and again, many people who are teaching it don't even know about the studies, and I'm not trying to be critical here, but mental health is a crisis even within the training and dissociative behaviors, and to the point of aspects of tipping somebody right over into delusionary aspects of the mind. What I do believe that on the positive side of this, and again, this is part of the package of the passion of all this, is that it's a healing tradition. It's a completely healing tradition. It's a wholeness. It's about wholeness, and it's about wholeness of holding the space for another person as we discover our own wholeness, and to create that safety so people reawaken to the beauty of the nature of who they are, and that beauty of the nature of who they are is empowered. And as I hearken back to the beginning of this talk with you and I, where you have witnessed the community, we hold the space for at times the struggle or the freedom to find the beauty of the individual in the community, and that they give it a try, that they even give as what may seem very simple to some, flower arranging, because we love nature and we do a lot with nature, even indoors as much as outdoors. That I've never tried this and I'm afraid to do it because it won't look good. Well, give it a go, because it's you. And the reward is in the observation of that person for me. The reward is to see them just all of a sudden disappear, and they create a beautiful bouquet, or they create a painting, or they create something, or they feel good. We have individuals who love to paint, and always just wanted to. We were never allowed to paint. We had one person years ago who was never allowed to paint their own home because their partner wouldn't let them. And so we had a paint party. This was years ago, and they were in their glory. I swear to God, they walked out as if we gave them a lottery ticket to win. That was the most wonderful day, was the comment. And all we did was that we had a paint party. We were painting the center, but the freedom to be able to do something that they always wanted to do. And it's encouraging, I think, in our tradition to find that space that we encourage healing, and that freedom of the nature and the beauty of the individual, and the magic of that spirit in that creator connection, that God connection within. And that has always been the tradition of what we do. We used to do it in tribes, as I mentioned. My on my mother's side, they come from that. Actually, both her parents do in their own way, and without getting into the family story. So it is that empowerment of uniting people into the talent, into the nature of who they are, and that really soothes the anxiety and the fear, because fear is a mind destroyer. And when we are afraid to be ourselves because we will be rejected and not accepted and not loved and what have you, it destroys the mind, and it creates anxiety, and it creates depression. And we are here within the ancient tradition to say, we will hold the space to you to discover. I grew up as just down the road from here, surrounded by a First Nations reserve. And I've mentioned this or shared with many that when we were young, we were allowed to be engaged and involved, and we learned traditions. Even the boys at the time, we were even allowed to learn basket weaving as well as totem carving and other traditions, and even the language. And one of the things that I remember, not just from that, but also the community that I belong to, is that we were encouraged to find who we were, because that who we were was an asset to the tribe, to the community. Yeah. And it was often the wise ones, the elders, the mystics, the mediums, whatever word you want to put on it, would empower people to hold the space. Those who embrace the spirit. And one of the things that I'd learned through my many years of traveling the world and serving different traditions and cultures is the true mystics never called themselves a mystic. It was never on a card. It was shaman was never on a card, you know. And I have witnessed many of those who have sought out the shaman or the mystic of those traditions because they were called differently. And there is a movement at the moment in some of the cultural tribes that they are not happy with, that some individual decided to clump everybody together as a shaman because it's insulting their traditional ways, because they are not shaman, because they don't belong to that tribe. So, there's a whole thing going on with that, but the world is hearing just that word. And yet it's insulting to some of the traditions, cultural traditions out there, that you would pass by these people running around for somebody who actually learned a magic trick or an illusion, And so the little old lady who could barely walk, who could do all things, was sitting there, and everybody would miss them. And I remember one individual was a gentleman who said, well, those who see me will see me, and I will serve them. And then you got to see the real magic. It's fantastic. I've been very, very fortunate in what I've witnessed and what I've known, and it is not anything that at times I can even share, because it's not worth sharing on one level, because it's something that is held in honor of them, right? So I must honor that as much as anything else. So when it gets down to, even when you hear somebody on a website, I'm a third generation medium. When I was growing up with my teacher, who, one of them, Winnie, and I've mentioned her before, and I've mentioned her in the book that Simon James and I wrote. She was, her father was in the village, and he was the healing medium, and that was his profession. And she had the profession of medium. She says, now in our day, you only mentioned that you were second generation medium if your parent worked as that. He wasn't called a medium back then, but the understanding was there. So when you see somebody say third generation, do you ever ask if they actually work professionally as a medium? Because if they didn't, that's not what a medium is. And that used to be the tradition many, many years ago. And she was born, she died in the mid-'80s, and she died at 104 and worked over 100. Right? And it was a training where you needed to have the experience and understanding before you got more information of the mysteries. And I remember, by good fortune, there was a Titan who often got missed at Stansted Hall at Arthur Findlay College. And we had very long talks over the years, because she always knew more than she let on, and her association with things. And I remember asking her questions, and she would sometimes, and I'm just shortening the story here, I'd ask her questions, and she'd look at me and she says, not now, pet, you're not ready. You need the experience before I tell you the next step. Amazing. Now, if we were to do that in a class of modern teaching today, we would literally, unfortunately, and shockingly at times, be yelled at, accused, screamed at, abused, and they would often take their toys and go to the next person who can supposedly give them the information. So the teaching has changed dramatically in my era of growing up in this work, in this field. Right. So,
but it feels strongly like that this is changing, because all of us would want to have good lives.
yes.
And to be whole and to like ourselves and to be a part of something. And you can't, in my opinion, you can't do that without being aware of all the esoteric part of it, because it's there where the gold is. And when you find that, you can shine in so many other ways very much easier.
I totally agree with you, and I think again this gets back to the mental health question, and why I went on to that aspect is because without us surrendering of our desires within sort of the esoteric tradition to think that the gold is outside of ourselves, but inside of ourselves, we cannot hold that power of the healing that the tradition, the esoteric truly is. It's all about healing. It's all about wholeness. It's all about empowering that spirit within, if you like, as most people understand that, in its truest sense, not a feel-good factor. No. You know, and so the more we do that, and the willingness to surrender, because it's all about surrendering, you see, then we can be at the table of being part of the solution of what this is about. As you know, I come from, and Simon James comes from, a psychological background. So, but what most people don't realize is the modern movement of psychology actually has roots in the study of Western mediumship and the esoteric movement. Most people don't know the history of that. That it was the study of the mind. It was the study of consciousness, you see. And it wasn't, as I mentioned, just a book. It was a study, right?
Sorry.
Because as we've gone through the quick fix and which many people do, and I'm sure anyone who is willing to listen to this talk between the two of us, any crises, what do? We go to a bookstore. Yeah. And we find the latest New Age book that is going to fix our life, because we're in crises at the moment. And we get halfway through it and put it down, right? Because we're feeling better. We never fulfill the practice of what that book offers. And sometimes it's a quick fix and there's really nothing in it because we're looking for a quick fix. Then, months, years later, another crisis. What do? We don't pick up that book. We go to the book, How to Help Yourself, Self-Help, New Age, whatever. Pick up the book. A lot of people got a whole library of self-help. It, New Age.
Yes, it's easy.
Right? And none of them have been fulfilled, or very few have been fulfilled. And because it isn't a quick fix, you see. Because it can't, simply because the brain, the neuroscience of the brain doesn't function that way. And again, that's a whole big story. That's a whole big conversation in itself. So again, that's why community is really important, and the passion of surrendering and being whole, and the letting go of the fairies in the backyard. To find that beauty within is something that is a never-ending story and a challenge. And at times you get up in the morning and you go, I thought I kind of put that to rest and it was at peace.
No,
it's not. No, it isn't.
I think that this would be lovely to know for young people, to know that you have your whole life to learn things, to be wise, to have experience, and so on. Yes. And it doesn't have to happen before you are 25, and after that everything is wasted. I mean, there's so many things it would be so beneficial for people to know about.
Absolutely. And I think
That
this
way.
is the whole thing, because you and I have been there. When we were 25, we knew everything, you know?
Yeah, I thought I did in many ways, and I was shocked about, is this everything? Is this all?
Yeah.
And where do I go from here?
Yeah.
And then suddenly life started.
Yes, exactly. Isn't it amazing? And to get through those trials and tribulations, and to find your own loving, to find your loving past thinking that you know everything, and discover the loving within, and how we love, and how we have passion for life. Even within the struggles, we so avoid the struggles, and yet the struggles are just part of life, and I share a little story that used to make me smile, of my brother, one of my brothers, because as you can see, I've got a certain hairstyle. Well, my brother was born with a very strong head of hair, and so when I was losing my hair every time he'd come to visit, because he lived in another part of the country, he'd kind of go, oh, it'd freak him out, because it's like, oh my God, because he was so identified with this beautiful, strong hair that the girls used to go wild, because it was the age of long hair.
Yeah.
And it was a part of his identity. And then here's somebody who kind of looks like him with no hair. And it's this identity of fear, right? And what is important. I'm sure today, I've never discussed it with him, but I'm sure today it doesn't matter. He still has his hair, but I believe it doesn't matter anymore. And so things that we believe matter, especially in that youthful, know-all world that we're here to conquer the world. If we could just encourage people, just conquer the fear within and seek the beauty within, then life will be magical, and you will do many magical things. Life will unfold. Not how you want it to, but how it needs to, for the very nature of who you are. And isn't that wonderful? As I was taught, even within the tribal consciousness, everyone in the tribe, everyone in the community has a place, and that place is of equal value. And when we can be at peace with our value, then we will change the world.
That's great. Well said. I just want, before we end up, Brian, to say that you wrote a book together with Simon James, and from what's the name again of the book? Magician to Mystic. Yeah. And that book is really a great book for everyone to contemplate of what we are, what we can be, where we're coming from, and a lot of things. So I would really strongly recommend that to everyone to read, as a not how to do book, but more to have an understanding of where we come from, what we can be, what we are, the magic of life itself that is there for everyone.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for mentioning it. I mean, our intention of writing the book, Simon and I, was really not to get a #1 seller. We didn't want to do a publisher. We actually wrote it in the intention of those who have journeyed with us over the last 3 decades. And we realized that some of the information that we were taught was no longer being taught. The foundations of that mystery school and its roots and the like. So that's why we wrote it. And you know, it's been picked up by others, so that's great. We're grateful for that. We do hope it serves everyone. So.
Thank you very, very much for your time, Brian. It was great to talk to you for a while and to hear your aspects and your view of things. So I'm grateful for that.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always wonderful not only to see you, but to talk to you. You know, you're part of our extended community, and people always remember you warmly and look forward to you being in your Canadian home.
Yes, I will be back soon. I'm longing actually. So I hope everyone is well there, and I wish you the best till I see you again, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.